you hear in the news these days, all right, about who's going to deliver the, what's called GB-57? All right. You can't carry that in a caisson, can you? No, Space Command's that's outer space there. Yeah. So, while I spent 20 some odd years in the Air Force, and my primary mission there was I was a navigator on a KC-135. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and tell you what I did. If you had a chance to take a look at the table back here in front of Bill's booth, that's some of the equipment that I had to use while I was a navigator on 135. And we're going to talk about the mission, about refueling some other jets. So, without delay, are we ready to rock and roll? All right. So I'm going to kind of walk around here, guys. If I can figure out how to work everything, it'll be good. Okay, that's men's ministry.
Learned it in the airport.
Do I have to push a button? Okay. All right. Title of this presentation, can you dim this light up there? All right, it's called air-to-air refueling or mid-air refueling or what I like to call it passing gas at 22,000 feet, okay? Anybody ever done that? Yeah, come on guys, you've all flown in airplanes before, so have you ever? Yes, okay, we know that, okay. All right, so before we get into this, what do I do now? Where do I point this? Okay. Anybody know the importance of December 1st, 1969? Any guesses? Well, yeah, Vietnam. We're in the middle of Vietnam then, yeah. No, come on. I'm not that old, am I? I'm not as old as Roger. December 1st, 1969. That was the day they initiated the first draft lottery for anybody born between January 1st and December 31st, 1950. My birthday is July the 8th. Some year. 1950. Guess which number? 18. Lucky number 13, okay? 82. All right, here, this is the board that they populated. So here it is, the July. They would have two drums. They'd pull out a date, July the 8th, and another drum, they'd go over and pull out a number, 13. So my future was kind of determined for me as I was getting ready to graduate from college. I enlisted in the Air Force and went to officer training school, and they said you could become a navigator. I said, I don't want to be a navigator, I want to be a pilot. And they go, we don't need any pilots, we need navigators. Oh, you want to be a pilot? I go, you want to fly helicopters? And I'm like, helicopters, Vietnam. They kind of fly standing still and they get shot at. I go, no, I think I'll pass on that. So I said, I'm going to be a navigator. And this is the aircraft that we get trained in. It's called a T-29. We would get 6 students in there. We'd take off out of Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, fly south to San Bernardino, hang a left, and go out to Needles, between the state line between Arizona and California. Thank you. I'm a navigator. We would turn around and come back. That was 6.5 hours. Okay. This is the jet I ended up going. When we finished our flight training, we got to pick the airplanes we wanted to fly in. And this is called the KC-135, all right? It is a Boeing 707, has 4 engines on it. Its primary function, it was a modified Boeing 707 at that time, okay? Its primary function is air refueling. The plane I flew in had 4 engines called J57s. Each engine had about 10,000 pounds of thrust. Get you up in the air pretty quick. Unless you were carrying a 200,000 pound fuel load, then you needed about a 12,000 foot runway to get airborne. It all depends on what altitude you're at, take off with. Back in back up. They later changed the engine to put in General Electric CFM56 engines, which increased the thrust to 21,650 pounds per engine. So that's about 85,000 pounds of thrust to get airborne with. The overall length of the aircraft is 136 feet. The height from the tail down to the ground is 42 feet. The wingspan, another 136 feet. Static weight, meaning empty, just sitting on the ramp, it's 102,000 pounds. Max takeoff gross weights of 302,000 pounds. When I flew in the jet, it was a 4-person crew. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and a boom operator. Anybody know what the boom operator is responsible for? Run it, fly the boom. Guys are sharp, let me tell you. All right, the unit cost per jet, back up. You just want to show that slide real bad, don't you? Is $39 million in fiscal year dollars. Okay, the next slide is the first crew I was on. Can you pick me out?
No.
I had 2 co-pilots, okay? Okay, next slide. There you go. All of 22 years old there, and still wet behind the ears, and thinking I was God's gift to the Air Force, you know? Of course, he had to be like that, right?
You don't even look like you.
And I got dark hair. And,
It's like Hitler.
yeah, you'd be surprised how many times I was called that name. I had a runny nose that did too. Okay, what's up next? I can't remember. Okay, when I was in active duty, we were in the middle of a Cold War. Who was our enemy during the Cold War? USSR, right? The defensive strategy we employed at that time was called MAD. Mutually Assured Destruction. Anybody take a guess what that means? Yeah, you nuke us, we nuke you. Right? There's not a winner, okay? Now, what made up that mutually assured destruction were 3 things. Sea-launched ballistic missiles, which the Navy had on submarines, primarily on submarines, and the Air Force had the other 2 arms. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. We had missile silos all over the United States with them. You've probably seen some movies about them in missile silos, right? They would go on alert there for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days at a time in the missile silo itself and live there before they come out and get a couple days off. And then the Strategic Air Command, which was the command I was in, we had the bomber force with primarily at that time FB-111s and B-52s, and of course the KC-135 that we had to go out and refuel these airplanes in case we had to go to war. Now, next slide. This is where we would spend a week at a time. This is a typical alert facility, okay? When I was on active duty, the one that I was in was at Plattsburgh Air Force Base. We had 10 tankers on alert there and about 8 FB-111s, okay? So, and with our crew chiefs, we would hold, it would basically hold about 100 men there. Chow Hall was there. Everything below ground were our sleeping quarters, above ground were training rooms, etc. This is the typical configuration of where the airplanes were on alert. This right here would be the alert facility. The horn goes off, okay? Bang, bang, bang. Okay, no matter where you are on the base, you jump into your vehicle and you get to the airplane as quickly as possible because the horn meant you got to start the engines because we may go into war, okay? My job when we got there was they're broadcasting a message. It's all encoded, so I have to receive the message, decode it, and pray to God it's only an exercise, okay? Because if it's not an exercise, that means we're going to launch. And I've never taken off in a jet that had 300,000 pounds, weighed 300,000 pounds. Ever take up the whole runway, so didn't want to really do that. But that's a typical configuration of, you'd have bombers and tankers. It's called the Christmas tree alert, okay? We would be on alert for 7 days at a time. And we get off alert, get 4 days off. Then we go out and fly training missions for about a week and a half, then go back on alert. We do the same thing over and over and over again, okay? If you guys have any questions as I go through, go ahead and yell them out, okay? All right, so in order to do that, though, that's our primary mission that we never, ever, ever wanted to execute, all right? But we had to train for it over and over again, all right? Because we have to get the bombs on target if we have to go to war against the Soviet Union. All right, next slide.
Where was this in the video?
This right here, okay, hang on. This right here is a typical alert facility. I was at Plattsburgh Air Force Base, upstate New York, about 60 miles from Montreal. across the Lake Champlain from Burlington. A lot of the bases were up north. We had Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, Malmstrom Air Force Base, and a missile base there in Montana, Minot and Grand Forks in North Dakota, K.I. Sawyer, Kinchlow in Michigan. We had another base in Rome, New York, Plattsburgh, New York, Loring, Maine.
Why do they tend to be kind of
That's what I was gonna ask, because you'd think the maintenance would be so much harder up north.
Well, where was the primary enemy? Russia. So you have to go over the pole. Okay. Now we did have bases at Carswell Air Force Base in Texas, Blytheville in Arkansas, Seymour Johnson in South Carolina, I think it was. Yeah.
Didn't that make your job, going over the pole, didn't that make your job a lot harder as a navigator?
Oh. Yeah, how we get into that? The reason being is that I take all my readings off of the longitudinal lines on the map. We'll show that a little bit later on. As you get to the North Pole, all the longitudinal lines converge together, okay? So, especially if you go to the pole, every point from there is south. So, you gotta figure out where you gotta go to get
Good
to
news
the...
is if you gotta drop a load, you drop it on Canada.
All right, so I got about a 4 or 5 minute video here that'll show us refueling. These are just training missions that will show you refueling F-15, F-16, B-52, and a AWACS airplane. Everybody know what an AWACS airplane is?
Yeah.
It has a big dome on it. The last part of that, it was what we would call an emergency breakaway, okay? Because when you're refueling two airplanes close together, they're only about, the boom itself is fully extended, it's 48 feet. And it's on a diagonal, okay? So you're probably maybe 38 to 40 feet apart separation, vertical separation between jets. And you can eat that airspace up in a real quick hurry there, okay? So you don't want that to happen. Whenever we would refuel, we'd get a block altitude, say from 20,000 to 22,000 feet. We'd refuel at 21,000 feet. If there's a breakaway, the boom operator calls you the call sign. We go throttles up, climb to the top of the block, receiver goes throttles to idle, drop to the bottom of the block, get in separation as quickly as possible. Because if you didn't, boom. Okay, let's show the video. All right, this is do you have sound?
Short Foxtrot, then check steering to me in the turn. Checks to you. Enter instruments here. Shall we?
Let's do it.
Alright, 89.5.
Rotate.
Girl, take off then.
You don't want to try to do it.
06 is my speed. Wait for more to get you. Nice slow turn.
Well, I did be fine for one more.
Clear the pressurize.
Still pressurizing.
Last look.
Your speed. Lights bent. TARA.
Yeah, I got it.
That's the F-15. You're about 40 feet apart right there. That's the boom operator.
Take a drone out, sir.
Hey, are they holding that in there?
Yeah, the receiver will have a, like, tongs that come out and grab, there's a little groove around the tip of the boom. So we'll try to jump over and keep it in there. And this is an F-16 coming in today. Notice that the receptacles are in a different place now, it's right behind the pilot. Typical airspeed, or true airspeed would be flying about 300. chin rest, for the chin, flying the boom and extending it, being able to extend it out too. That's still not 16 right? Alright.
Gary, how long does it take? How long do they usually hook up?
Depends how much gas they need. Keep it off for about 4,000 pounds a minute. The largest offload we had was on a C5. We offloaded about 100,000 pounds, so we hooked up quite a long. That was a B1. When I was going through tests out at Edwards Air Force Base, I got a chance to get out there and feel all those test aircraft. Yeah.
6-0, I'll take it down too.
Notice the receptacle's in a different position here too.
Go left. 6-0, disconnect.
Really? Depends on how much gas they need.
And you're done,
Offload about 4,000 pounds a minute.
Just one. And from 6-0, just a 1.
Okay.
Just a drop that.
1-1 is complete, moving to.
These are just Christmas videos I put together. There's another big one coming in.
Copy. Drops to the right.
No, we pumped it in. We pump it in. Yeah.
6-0.
The co-pilot's primary job is to monitor the fuel that's being offloaded. Now, this is the AWACS airplane. Which is basically a Boeing 707 with a big dome on top of it. Radar dome. Watch this now. Oh, hold on, he's getting too close. Whoa, 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 whoa. So it happened real quick, guys, real quick. And we're only 45 feet apart, and that's how fast it can happen. And it ruined your day. Yeah. So what normally happens is the boom operator would say, if our call sign was Bozo 12, Bozo 12, breakaway, breakaway, breakaway. And the aircraft commander, the pilot, will be sitting there with his hands on the throttle throughout the whole refueling. As soon as he hears breakaway, you know, he pushes the throttle full forward, okay? Then he starts climbing to the top of the block, and the receiver should then retard his throttle to go down to the bottom of the block so we get quick separation and everything.
Well, okay, decide, why did they reduce the number of people on the flight, 4 to 3? Why was it, was it manpower constraint, or, I mean, what was the operational reason for it?
I was a navigator. This was my high-tech equipment I used. This was my computer. It's called an MB4A. This is before GPS, before... Matter of fact, when I was going through nav school, we're out there do some celestial observations in the evening. Somebody's telling me, they go, you know, they're going to put satellites up in the air, they're going to get rid of our job. I'm like, you're crazy, that'll never happen. Cars have it now. No, that was the computer, and this was how I did the celestial observations, the sextant. Okay? Yeah.
1492.
And it's called a periscopic sextant for obvious reasons. You put it up in there's a port in the roof of the airplane, lock it in there, and I would do calculations. I'll get into talk about it a little bit. Calculations so I could find the celestial body that would give me the best opportunity to figure out where I'm at. Fred?
When the planes weren't exactly lined up side to side, front and back, did the boom operator pull that, or were there two planes?
The receivers?
Either one.
You mean I talk about tanker and receiver.
Okay, the boom is down. It's almost ready to hook in, but they're a little bit left or a little bit right. Who made the move?
The question is, how does the receiver know where to go? Because the tanker is going to be flying its course. I'm giving the pilot directions on we got to turn up here, we got to turn over there, whatever. Okay, so I'm monitoring our position, and keeping us on course. The receiver, when he's coming in, you can see on the belly of the tanker, there's a big yellow line. And at the end of it, there are, it's called PDI lights, if I can recall correctly. If you saw red lights, you were too high. Okay, that means you had to go down. The receiver pilot had to lower his altitude. If he saw all yellow lights, he was too low, he had to come up. What he was looking for were all green lights. And once he got into the green light position, the boom operator stabilized, and he'd come in forward and then have a contact then.
So the boom is just sticking out there and the.
Well, he can move it one way or the other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's got little wings on it. He can move it one way because to keep it, it's not stabilized like that. It's not rigid. Okay, it can move one way or the other because the aircraft is going to move one way or the other too. Okay. Now I'll talk a little bit about most aircrafts will do like a yaw pitch and a roll. Chris.
You ever see any crashes?
That's not a
Not allowed to
secret.
say.
No, I didn't. I saw it on my radar scope. Put it that way.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll get to it in a minute when I'll show you what we're going to do. Prior to going out and doing any training mission, we'd have to do our mission planning. We spend the day before our mission planning out our mission. My job here was to put together our route of flight, what altitude we were flying at, what's the true airspeed, what's our anticipated wind to get that from weather. And from there, I would take and plot my true course based upon the longitudinal lines, add my magnetic variation. Why would I need to add magnetic variation? There's a difference between the North Pole, true North Pole, and magnetic North Pole, okay? And it varies wherever you are on the face of the Earth. So I have to add my magnetic variation to get my magnetic heading, okay? And then sometimes there's an error in the compass itself, so you make that application. Most of the time that we didn't have to do that. So we get a mag heading. That's the heading that I would give the pilot to fly, okay? I couldn't find the exact flight plane that I used to use. This is from an EC-130. It's very similar to what we used to use. We would determine the distance to our next checkpoint, what the ground speed we're going to be flying, based upon how the wind is affecting us. So I have to take the true airspeed and apply my wind to it to get the ground speed, all right? And it would give me the different ETAs for the different points that we're going to be in our flight plane that we'd have to get to. So we put that whole route of flight together. The pilots would determine what the fuel loads are going to be, when they're going to offload, how they're going to manage the fuel load within the aircraft itself, because you've got different fuel cells, and you have to maintain a certain center of gravity, a balance, okay? And if you get too much gas on one side of the airplane, it has, kind of leans one way or leans the other way. So the co-pilot was the fuel specialist, and the boom operator, he got 3 officers to take him to work every day, okay? And he would get out there and he'd make the contact. Next slide. This is the chart. This is on the reverse of what the mission planning sheet was. This is, my job was to record everything that happened in flight. So I would take GMT's, Greenwich Mean Time. All aircraft in the world fly on Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, that's the time it is in Greenwich, England. All right. So for here in the United States right now, it is 9 o'clock. We're on daylight savings time, so it'll be 9 plus 4. So right now it's 1,300 hours Greenwich Mean Time. All right. So the reason why we do that is everybody has to be able to, you can't go by what time zone you're in, right? So everybody has to be on the same type of time schedule. I would record whatever fix, after like a radar fix or a dead reckoning. Any pertinent information there, determine my true course, understand what the wind's doing to me, get my true heading, add my variation, come up with my magnetic heading, compass heading, then I would make any course corrections based upon that to where we had to go, okay? Over water, this is the tool that we use all the time, okay, the sextant, and I'll show you some pictures of it. You can't see it back there, okay? But everybody in the crew had a particular job they had to do. When we're using the sextant, I did the calculations to find the celestial body, the sun, the planets, the stars, whatever, And the boom operator is the one that actually did the observation. Okay, next slide. That's my high-tech equipment, okay? My dividers and my plotter, okay? I would use that to take out, this is where I find my place on the map, my chart that I'm using, where I need to go, and I would plot out my course and put that on my on the in-flight data sheet and calculate the heading I have to do. At the equator, there's 60 miles, 60 nautical miles between each degree of latitude. And I would use, and it's on the chart that I use, it would be broken down in 10-mile increments, 5 and 10-mile increments. So you know, you'd be able to figure out how far we got to go based upon, I'd span my dividers out to where I wanted to go and say, all right, I got 120 miles to go, and my ground speed is doing, you know, 420 or whatever, so 420 for that, and give me an ETA. All right, next slide. Again, that's my computer that I used back in 1972 through 82. I took it out, and for the life of me, I don't know how to operate it anymore. But it was, I used it every day, every time I went out to fly, I used it. It would, I'd have to figure out, and again, of course, you can see here is true heading equals true course plus or minus the drift. Mag heading plus or minus the variation. Had little hints up there. Matter of fact, you can see right up here, I put a little plus sign here, a little negative sign here. The reason why I did that is I told you about magnetic variation, right? How many degrees you're different from the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole. Well, I'm a young second lieutenant getting ready to go to Southeast Asia. All right, take off out of Plattsburgh Air Force Base in upstate New York. We happen to have 15 degrees east variation plus. So I had to take my true course, add 15 degrees to that, etc. Okay? To get my compass heading where to fly. We fly from there to March Air Force Base in Riverside, California. We're going to go to Hickam Air Force Base the next day. We blast off out of March Air Force Base going to Hickam. And out there they have 15 degrees west variation. I misapplied my sign. We're going 30 degrees off where we should be going, 30 degrees off heading. And we're on our way to Southeast Asia.
I thought you were going to say Las Vegas.
I hear LA Center go, Bozo 1-2, say your intentions, please, with a lot of excitement in their voice. I quickly looked down and I went, oh, golly gee. I think I made a computation. No, navigators don't make mistakes. I can't remember the word I used, but probably not appropriate either. Anyways, I said, pilot nav, come left, immediately 45 degrees. We turn left, we fly that heading for about 4 or 5 minutes. I said, all right, come right, and I give him another heading. He goes, what happened? I said, you don't want to know. So they figured out I'd given the wrong heading, and we're on our way to Hickam Air Force Base, just Honolulu, okay? And the pilots would sit this way, pilot and co-pilot, and my nav station I had to sit sideways like this in the aircraft, okay? They closed the curtain between me and them. I said, oh, they're upset with me, you know? I mean, I've got maybe 50 hours in the jet, and I'm going over to Southeast Asia to, you know, support the war effort over there. And after about, I guess it was probably about 4 hours, 4.5 hours, all over water, they go, I said, all right, I got us about maybe a mile, 2 miles north of course. We can get radio nav lock-on from Honolulu. And they opened the curtain, they said, all right, you did a good job, Nav. If you gave us any heading that was going to take us away from those contrails up there, we weren't going to believe you, because they were following a TWA jet on the way to Honolulu. So I gained their confidence, okay?
The Army helicopter pilots in Europe follow the Autobahns.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Because the next day we had to fly from Hickam to Guam, which was 8 hours over water, and they want to make sure I knew what I was doing there. Okay, what do we got next here, Bill? This was my nav station. These are the instruments that I would monitor, okay? This is my radar. Okay, my radar, it usually has it would have a hood over it, but it's not, doesn't show that because the hood would make it so I could actually see what's on the radar screen there. These are the different radios that we had to monitor. This is my compass. This is my drift meter, altimeter. I can't remember exactly. This is, it's been a long time. It's been 45 years. Come on, huh? This is my oxygen indicator. We used to have to wear a helmet during air refueling and a parachute, okay? During air refueling. The only way you get out of the aircraft was through the crew entry chute. You'd have to go like this, and hopefully who could bail out after midair anyways, So eventually they took away the helmets and the parachutes. This is called the RAN. We'd use that over water to get a signal off the waves if we could, but it was very ineffective. But primarily I use the compass, the drift meter, and my radar over land. But you can see this is vintage. Actually, vintage 1955 to 58 when they first came out. Okay, obviously that's all gone now. Okay, because somebody asked the question earlier, what's the difference between 4 and 3? They got rid of all this, got rid of me, navigators. Okay, especially since the Cold War ended, we don't have any guys on alert. There's no reason to go over the pole. Okay. Because when you go over the pole, you had to take your compass out of magnetic mode and put it into a different mode and do a lot of different calculations so that you can still fly the track you were supposed to be flying in order to get there. And I've forgotten how to do that too. Okay, what do we got next? This is the periscopic sextant, okay? We would take a celestial observation. These right here would put filters in. If you're looking at the sun, it would put certain filters in so that, because when you look at the sun, you don't want that thing to burn your eyeball out, okay? You can adjust, as you look through it, there's a little bubble in the sextant with a crosshair. So once you've got your celestial body, you put it in the middle of the bubble, keep the middle of the bubble in the middle of the crosshairs. And you would, this wheel over here, you could, because the body's going to move on you. The sun's going to, because the sun rises and sets, stuff like that. So you try to keep the celestial body in the middle of the crosshairs, okay? There's a computation I would go through, and once the sextant got done operating, they would have to realign the indices. I don't have a picture of that. It's right behind this little knob right here. And the boom operator would read that number to me. And I would take that number and compare it to the calculation I had and determine what the difference is and get a line of position off from that. The sextant would operate for 2 minutes before it would shut off because it's plugged into an electrical outlet. Right here, and plugged into the aircraft electrical system. The reason why it ran for 2 minutes because the KC-135 in a 2-minute period would go through a yaw, pitch, and roll, okay? That would affect my reading if I didn't figure out a way to zero that out. So they came up with this periscopic sextant that would run for 2 minutes, which would zero out into the yaw, pitch, and roll. So you'd be a little bit more accurate with that, okay? What's next? Okay, this is what the boom operator is looking at the aircraft, okay? You can see this is updated for DEI. That's a little joke, guys. That's a female boom operator, okay? But you can see the boom. That's the boom pod. That's the tail of the aircraft, and that's the window that they're looking out. So when the boom operators go back there, they open up that window, and they're basically laying down on their belly with a little chin on the chin strap there, waiting for the receiver to come in. All right. Next, this is what the receiver will be looking at. Here's the big yellow line. These down here, you can see the lights, the PDI lights, pilot directional indicators, whatever. And that's the boom extended out, okay? So what the receiver should be doing is, he shouldn't be looking at anything else, just staring at these lights right here. so that he gets in position so that we can make the contact. We would fly out of Plattsburgh Air Force Base. There's Plattsburgh. Now, the question becomes, how do you know where the receiver is? How does the receiver find you? Okay? Well, there's a thing called ARCP, Air Refueling Control Point, and the Air Refueling Initial Point. The tanker would have to go in there, and I'd set up an orbit. We're given a control time, 1400 Zulu or something like that we had to be over this particular point at that particular altitude, okay? The receivers would come in, that's about 100 miles away, that's 100 miles, from air refueling initial point. And I would have, on interplane frequency, I'd start talking to them. And I would find out where they're at. I would see a beacon come up. I gotta get a drink here. Anyway,
I'll get it for you.
All right.
That's what he did when he was active duty. I had to have a drink before.
Air Force Day.
Calculation next.
No, I can't tell you about those times. So my job was to pick the receiver up on my radar screen. Thank you. And on the radar screen there would be like little blips. Now somebody asked me if I've ever seen a midair. Okay? Well, I'm going down to, thank you, Chris. I'm going down to pick up the receiver here, but I get the two little blips. And I can't remember their call sign were, but anyways, I see one coming in from the north, one coming in from the west, and what they would do is they would come in and get information together at the ARIP, all right? And once I see them coming in together, then I would turn and we go down and start picking them up. And I had to calculate how far I had to go down before I'd make a turn to come back, because we were supposed to roll out in front of the receiver with the receiver's 1 mile in trail, okay? Well, I see the blips, and one's got 3 little blips, and one's got 2 little blips. I see them coming together. Then all of a sudden, I don't see them anymore. Oh, must be wrong, something wrong with my radar. So I call them up again. Bozo 1-2, Bozo 1-3. That's 4. Same tension, where are you? Nothing again. Finally, I hear Bozo 1-2's got 3 good shoots. Bozo 1-3's got 3 good shoots. What had happened is they're coming in together, so one guy's coming up like this, and number 2's coming in behind him, and he clips his tail. That midair. So it was FB-111, so they ejected the whole capsule, kind of like the Mercury capsule. The whole capsule got ejected, and then they come floating down, and we went down and kind of flew cover for them. But I never saw them hit. I saw it on radar. They were there, then they weren't there. Okay. But you can see how fast something like that can happen in the aircraft. So when you're flying an airplane, any pilots in here? Okay, I can make up a story right now. No, there's an expression that we use, you always have to stay ahead of the aircraft, okay? Because things can go wrong pretty quickly and you have to be able to respond to that. This is the typical mission. We would go down and pick up the receivers, we start refueling, go up the end of, this is up northern Maine here. Drop off the receivers there, they get their clearance, we get our clearance, come down. This is the start nav point, and I'd fly a nav leg down to here, turn point, and nav here, and go back into Plattsburgh Air Force Base. All right, a few things about this chart. These are the longitudinal lines right here. I take my readings from, okay, my true course off of. See this right here? I circled it. That's 16 degrees west variation. There are blue dotted lines. Here's 14 degrees. Here is, I don't know, something else. 12 degrees west variation. So no matter where I am on that, I have to continually adjust my mag heading based upon the variation here. Now earlier somebody asked a question about why do you fly over the North Pole, okay? We have these other lines right here. See this right here? These? Those are called grid lines. And there was a computation we'd have to go through to take our magnetic compass out of mag heading and orient to grid north end. And if you did it correctly, it's no problem. If you did it incorrectly, you'd have a problem. And believe it or not, there was grid variation too. That's 30 degrees east grid variation. So my point being is it's a, without any navigation equipment like GPS or anything like that, it becomes a very complicated process, especially when you don't have any navigation. Over land, it's not a problem because you got TACANs and vortex and all that stuff that pilots would use in flyby. You got radar, you can take pictures off them and everything. So, all right, next slide.
Jerry, are these all active duty Air Force or some of them guard units or?
Now, Plattsburgh is just a municipal airport now.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the units, the Air Force units themselves. Any of these guard units, or they're all active? I mean, I know that in the Army, what they did was, back in the 90s, they took some critical expertise out of the active force and put in the Guard and Reserves on purpose.
Yeah.
So that you couldn't go to war unless you used part of the Guard and Reserve.
Yeah, the Grayson Air Force Base was up in Kokomo, Indiana, just north of Indianapolis. They have that is a reserve unit there now. They have about, probably 10, 12 units there. My son used to fly out of there. Okay. And yeah, they went to support Afghanistan and Iraq. He's done over there and did all that stuff. There's a lot of reserve units and guard units that will support active duty activities. This is just a close-up of airfield control point and airfield initial point. And the little curvature, the orbit I put up here is the 135. When it would have to do a 180, it would go in a 30-degree bank, and it would take 2 minutes to roll out 180 degrees. So it takes 4 minutes for us to do a complete 360. And I have to factor that into my calculations and start heading down towards the receivers. And as I'm doing that, I have to calculate how is the wind affecting us, how's the wind affecting them. Because I have to calculate when do I start my turn back northbound so that I roll out, the aircraft rolls out 1 mile in front of those guys. And we do that. At first it looks very, very complicated, but after you do it a number of times, it becomes pretty easy. And again, that's just up through northern Maine and refueling, then starting that lake. All right, next slide. I think I have one more of the. Oh, okay. Each year, the National Air Almanac Office, blah, 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 I guess the United States Navy, Secretary of the Navy puts this out. It's to help with celestial navigation. Next slide.
Oh, yeah, that's a help. Yeah.
There's like, notice these are all Zulu times, Greenwich Mean times. There's the sun, there's Aries, a star, Venus, and Mars. A whole bunch of other stars over here. So these are calculations already done ahead of time to tell me what's the I got to know where to turn the sextant in order to find the celestial body. All right, you're up there at 30,000 feet flying around. You got to find a star out there amongst all these other hundreds of thousands and millions of stars. And this is the declination. This is how far up do I have to raise the sextant? How far down do I have to look at it? Okay. And based upon that, all right, next slide. This is what they call a celestial computation. It's kind of blurry, but normally I would put, these are like 3 different stars. This looks like I can't read that. Yeah, it looks like 3 different stars. They do the celestial calculation, and based upon what the reading is after they get done, when the sextant shuts off, they'd have to realign the indices, and they get a reading from that, and I would compare that actual reading to what I calculated from, then be able to plot a line of position to help me figure out where the aircraft is. Okay, next slide. Now, 2 types of things, all right? During the daytime, obviously you can't see very many stars. If you're lucky, you might be able to see a planet, Venus or Mars or something like that, but most of the time, or the moon. But obviously most of the time you're going to be able to see the sun. All right. So I would start out here at the beginning of Nav Lake. I would calculate what my heading's going to be, how the wind's affecting me, and come up with a It's called a D, or dead reckoning, okay? Then I do my calculation, do my celestial observation off the sun. Ideally, that line would go right straight through where my dead reckoning position is. If it's not, I got to pick a point somewhere between that line and that position there, and it's called MPP. Take a guess. Anybody?
Military Police Patrol.
Most probable position. It's basically a nice way of saying it's my best guess I got. Okay? It's because my celestial observation says I should be on this line of position someplace. Okay? My dead reckoning says I should be here, so I'm in this area here someplace. Okay? Now this down here is from 3 celestial observations. Ideally, you'd want all 3 lines to intersect at the same spot. Then you say, this is where I truly am. If they don't, then it forms like a little triangle. You'd say, all right, this is my fix then. This is where I'm at. And from there, I'd figure out my ETAs and my next course I want to take. Okay? Next slide. Is that it? Okay. Question.
Yeah, I'd say if that was my option, just send me to Vietnam.
Question. Do you know who that guy is?
Who is that?
That's a very young guy, all right? There's my wings there. I got a star with a reef on it. That means I got over 3,000 hours there. Do you know who this gentleman is?
Neil Armstrong.
Very good, very good. Yeah, that's my claim to fame. I got to meet Neil Armstrong at a reception where I was a commander of a small detachment on Long Island in a defense contractor's plant. And he was on the board of directors there, and he came in, and so we got a chance to have a chit chat with him. Okay. Well,
Jerry, how accurate, when you did that pinpoint celestial, how accurate was that? What did you figure, a mile within a point?
I did a lot of praying. Like, really, especially over water. Over water and over the pole, because there's, you had to be extremely accurate. I did more celestial observations when I was over water going over the pole.
I mean, plus or minus, what are you talking about?
Depends if how turbulent the air was when I was doing the celestial observation. How accurate you can keep that celestial body in the middle of that bubble. You keep there, that accuracy happens. There's a lot of different variables that would throw it off, but I would say plus or minus 5 miles. Okay, so that was it. So yeah, that was. Sometime I'll tell you about the story about Neil Armstrong. But all right, we got one more video to show. Okay, this is of the B-2. Okay, this is the one they're talking about in the news.
Approaching 5 feet. About 5. Contact all movement aircraft, how do you hear?
Clear, dummy.
Got you loud and clear. Looking good. And confirm you want 55 from us.
Yeah, we'll take everything we can get.
Roger that.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing today?
Doing all right.
Guy's hitting on her already.
Yeah, you guys are looking good still. Can you come at about 15 feet? And about 30 degrees. Okay.
See the other one back there?
That's receiver 2 talking to you. Alright, we've got 2 coming into position.
All right, that's about it. So, I share this here because, like anything else, for our country to be in the position it's in today, we got the Navy, we got the Army, we got the Air Force, we got the Marines. And the only way we can do it is through peace, through strength. Okay, we have to have a strong military in order to be able to defend our way of life and everything, so. I know I ran a little bit long today, guys, but I hope you enjoyed it. A little bit something about what I did and everything. Keep that in mind. All right, thank you all. Chris.
Boy, that was awesome, huh? How many didn't know Jerry was that smart? I'll tell you, Roger, when you brought him on as an elder, we had no idea he was.
This thing sucked the fun out of flying.
That's unbelievable.
I had a question as a faithful elder, which Jerry is. Did he steal all this stuff then?
Yeah, did you steal? Well, he's repented since then. He's an elder now. So he's already repented there. So, hey guys, listen, we're not going to keep you, but I just have a minute here. Listen, I want you to know we appreciate you being here today. And I want you guys to know you got a family here at Fairway. You know that? And